Andrew, I know that you have been watching this hearing alongside really the entire nation, if not the world. What are the biggest takeaways at this point? What do you think are the top headlines for what we've heard so far?
Yeah, well, good afternoon, Veronica. And I think this first session of today's hearing was really focused on how not only the president was surrounded by people who were telling him that his claims of election fraud were incorrect, but the extent to which the president knew, especially from those close and presumably respected members like the Attorney General Bill Barr and his former campaign manager Bill Stepien. And the other interesting thing I think noted from the hearing this morning is just what it was like at the White House on election night, and that a number of people around Trump were urging him on election night to come out and say that they felt like they were in a good place, that they would continue to fight as the votes continue to come in throughout the country, but that instead he opted to go with advice that was being portrayed by Rudy Giuliani, who the committee says, and according to the depositions we saw, was actually inebriated that night. And so I think this session was really focused on not only refuting some of those election claims, which we've known for now since the 2020 election have been false, but also going to lay out the extent to which those around Trump really went out of their way at times to make it known that the president himself was well aware of that. And so those are some of the big headlines. I think this afternoon we're going to hear a little bit more, not only on these topics, but how these were in some ways weaponized by the Trump campaign to raise money for alleged legal battles. That we know legal battles did take place, but you heard the committee this morning say that the money raised wasn't actually going to those legal battles. It was going somewhere else, and that will help kind of build what potentially could even be a criminal case, although we know that that would be very unprecedented and a pretty extreme step. We do know that the committee is pledged to go wherever the investigation leads them, Veronica.
Andrew, I want to go ahead and circle back to Trump's campaign, because as you mentioned, there were several members on his campaign that were saying there was no election fraud. Yet there was Rudy Giuliani who didn't quite say that. So have they made a strong enough case at this point that Trump knew he lost the 2020 election? And why do you think that is so important for the committee to establish?
Yeah, well, it's interesting. We just heard some of the taped deposition of a top Department of Justice official that I think they foreshadowed will be appearing before the committee later, either in the week or the month. And his claim was that he would take this information to Trump and say, hey, Trump wanted the Department of Justice to investigate all these claims that were out there. And they would take their findings and say, no, this isn't true. And he would kind of accept them, but then he would just move on to another one. And one of the ones that was highlighted certainly was those Dominion voting systems, this idea that there are machines that could just on the flip of a dime somehow change votes from Trump to Biden, that they were somehow responsible for his loss, which we know there's no evidence for that as well. And so I think part of the problem for those around the former president trying to show him that he had in fact lost was that there was just so much out there, and it was coming not only from some of the people around him like Rudy Giuliani, but from conservative media, other conservative pundits who were putting all this stuff out there and really making it almost an impossible task for the Department of Justice or for anyone else to get to the president and say, no, this isn't true. Okay, well, what about the next thing? And that was really the uphill battle that I think we saw play out earlier today, the importance of making sure or making it seem that the president was well aware of the falsities, because it means that he was essentially lying and deceiving people. And as Liz Cheney said in those opening comments, there are hundreds of people now in jail because they believed what the president was saying, and they stormed the Capitol on January 6th. And it's very possible that they did so under the guise that the president himself knew was a lie, and as well as hundreds of millions of dollars that was raised by the Trump campaign in that time period, that people were opening up their wallets to support what perhaps the president knew was a very false and misleading venture in fighting these court battles.
Andrew, it's interesting that you should mention that, because as these hearings are taking place, there is counter-programming from the other side. We have to take a break, but hopefully we'll be able to talk more about that in the next hour. Newsy political director Andrew Rafferty live in Washington. Andrew, thank you.